Translator, Dark Angel. Editor, Kurisu. All present were struck dumb with disbelief. 81 spiritual infant tier soldiers possessed power enough to overturn rivers and drain seas. Yet Ling Han had merely unsheathed a treasured sword, and the mere presence of that blade caused the figures of those soldiers to tremble violently, as though they stood on the brink of annihilation. This was suppression from an entirely different realm. Level 8, or perhaps even a level 9 spirit tool, someone cried out, voice quivering uncontrollably. Spirit tools were no common weapons. They were supreme treasures, forged upon the foundation of level 7 precious metals, then tempered and nourished over long years by martial intent, thereby giving birth to boundless might. The terror of such spirit tools was beyond imagination. Even in the hands of flower blossom tier cultivators, they could unleash the power of the spiritual infant tier. For instance, that ancient Qin of Wang Yiyun must at the very least be a 7th tier spirit tool to summon 81 spiritual infant tier warriors. Though those warriors were not flesh and blood, their might did not pale before the genuine article, and they knew neither fear of death nor dread of injury. The higher the grade of a spirit tool, the more arduous its completion. For in this world, powerful figures were as numerous as clouds, and the cultivation of a spirit tool required no fewer than several dozen years. As time flowed on, the martial intent infused within could likewise be worn away. Unless the spirit tool succeeded in birthing its own tool spirit, enabling it to absorb the energy of heaven and earth on its own, preserving the martial intent within, so that it would only fade upon the destruction of the spirit tool itself. Thus, when the two displayed their high-tier spirit tools, it was as though thunder had exploded amidst the crowd. This was not merely battle, it was a declaration of power. Otherwise, even if one possessed level 7 or level 8 precious metal, so what? One might forge a weapon of equal hardness, but it would lack the living might of a true spirit tool. A distinct shift finally surfaced upon Wang Yiyun's countenance. The demon birth sword pressed down upon her like a towering mountain, and the confidence she had worn at the outset began to crumble. How could the spiritual infant tier possibly fall before the flower blossom tier? Her heart burned with vexation. When geniuses reached the pinnacle of the flower blossom tier, it was true they could defeat some low or even mid-level spiritual infant tier cultivators. She herself stood at only the 2nd layer of the spiritual infant tier, yet her battle prowess had already reached 10 stars. No matter how one viewed it, she possessed absolute advantage in this confrontation. She absolutely could not allow herself to be cowed by her opponent. Her fingers moved ever more swiftly upon the chin. The notes surged like a rising tide, transforming into a mighty army. The 81 spiritual infant tier soldiers instantly regained their divine bearing, as though fresh blood had been infused into their veins, and they charged once more toward Ling Han. Ling Han merely smiled faintly. As his comprehension of sword arts deepened, he had unlocked yet another pattern upon the demon birth sword, elevating the might of this level 10 spirit tool by yet another step. What did a level 10 spirit tool represent? When its power was fully unleashed, it was equivalent to the might of a supreme elite of the shattering void tier. He swung his sword, hung. 29 strands of sword chi converged into a pseudo-ray. With a poo sound, it cleaved toward a spiritual infant tier soldier. That soldier hastily raised his battle spear to parry, yet this pseudo-ray had been born from a level 10 spirit tool. Its destructive force surpassed even that of a true ray. In an instant, both soldier and spear were split cleanly in twain. One strike, enough to slay a spiritual infant tier warrior. Hiss! The crowd drew in sharp breaths. A single thought echoed within their minds. Ling Han's strength chilled one's very marrow. Had Ling Han been a heaven-defying monster like Yao Hui Yue, or the little Saber King, perhaps they could have accepted it. After all, those figures had already stepped into the spiritual infant tier. With their battle prowess, sweeping through peers was only natural, but Ling Han remained within the flower blossom tier. Ling Han's sword continued to sweep without pause. Each wave claimed another opponent. He possessed the stamina to unleash his blade 81 times without faltering, and those 81 soldiers were all cleaved apart. Logically speaking, they bore no physical bodies, they had no vital points, and even when sliced in half, should have been able to reconstitute and resume battle. Yet the sword ray born from the demon birth sword carried the might of a level 10 spirit tool. How could they possibly piece themselves together again? Their only destiny was erasure. Wah! Wang Yiyun spat out a mouthful of blood, her beautiful eyes brimming with shock. She had long refined this treasured chin. Her heart and spirit were bound to it as one. Now that the 81 soldiers had been shattered and destroyed, she too suffered backlash. It felt as though flames licked at her heart, an agony beyond words. Defiance flared within her. With a light tap upon her treasured chin, wing, a slender sword shot forth from within its body. The sword was exceedingly thin, its blade fine as a chin string. Without careful observation, it would be nearly impossible to discern. Wang Yiyun struck out. The blade, string-like in appearance, transformed into a silk thread that shot forward to entangle Ling Han. Moreover, it seemed endless, like blood-sucking origin gold. It could extend without limit. Yet this sword had not been forged from blood-sucking origin gold. Rather, the sword chi and origin power she unleashed fused in wondrous fashion, weaving toward Ling Han like an enormous net cast over him. This is the Wang clan's ultimate art, the falling shadow twining silk sword technique. Years ago, the Wang clan's ancestor relied upon this supreme art to roam the world unopposed. Who would have imagined Wang Yiyun had already mastered it? She truly deserves the title of genius. Fairy Wang, cleave this brat in half. Shocked cries erupted, and even more voices rose in support of Wang Yiyun. Naturally, they wished to see this fairy triumph. Interesting, Ling Han murmured. With a flick of his right wrist, fierce sword chi surged from the demon birth sword, effortlessly severing the silken threads encircling him. So long as the disparity in strength was not overwhelming, a level 10 spirit tool inherently possessed crushing advantage. Wang Yiyun soared into the air, her white robes billowing about her like a moonlit fairy dancing upon the heavens. Yet with each slash of her blade, a ferocious flash of sword chi burst forth, arcing in strange trajectories toward Ling Han, forming a bizarre spectacle. Ling Han activated the thunderclap ninth heaven. His battle prowess soared explosively, reaching 15 stars of the spiritual infant tier. He charged directly at Wang Yiyun. Ding, ding, ding! The two swords clashed incessantly, terrifying radiance erupting with each collision. Even flower blossom tier cultivators dared not stare too long, lest their eyes be seared blind. Wang Yiyun's face paled in astonishment.
With every exchange, her body tingled as though struck by lightning. The sensation was so unbearable she nearly coughed up blood. Even her origin power ran in disarray, preventing her from unleashing her full might. In direct confrontation, she was actually inferior to a flower blossom tier cultivator. One could only say the thunderclap ninth heaven was far too tyrannical, so overpowering it could heavily suppress even a supreme genius like Wang Yiyun. Ling Han pressed her relentlessly. Within a mere few dozen moves, her sword was knocked from her grasp and sent flying. Wang Yiyun ground her teeth. Drawing out a hairpin, she hurled it skyward. Instantly, a crystalline radiance shone forth, rapidly enlarging until it spanned 10 feet in length, resembling a most peculiar boat. Ling Han frowned and said, "If you continue pestering me, I'll spank your behind." Wang Yiyun burned with humiliation and fury. How could she possibly heed him? She continued to manipulate the hairpin, origin power concentrating at its tip. It condensed into a sphere of light that exuded a terrifying aura, as though capable of shattering heaven and earth. Disobedient! Thunderlight flickered across Ling Han's body. Though he had yet to transform into lightning itself, his speed tripled instantly. In a flash, he appeared above Wang Yiyun. The demon birth sword swept downward, striking directly upon Wang Yiyun's. Ah! Wang Yiyun cried out, first from pain, second from shame. This man truly dared to spank her. Yet she remained a prodigy of her era. Even under such circumstances, she maintained control of the hairpin and unleashed its attack toward Ling Han. Shoo! A streak of light shot forth, bearing astonishing destructive force. Ling Han slashed with all his might, utterly shattering the streak of light. Yet numbness spread through his right hand, so severe he nearly could not lift it again. He could not help but marvel. His physique was already shockingly powerful. Yet such a strike left him feeling this miserable. This hairpin was indeed extraordinary. Pa pa pa. He repeatedly spanked Wang Yiyun's translator, Dark, angel editor, Kurisu. All were struck senseless. This was Wang Yiyun, a fairy acknowledged by all beneath the heavens. Moreover, she was the cherished pearl of the Wang clan, an outstanding disciple of the Blue Thunder sect. And yet now, before so many eyes, her backside had actually been spanked by a man? This? Envy surged like wildfire. Countless hearts burned with longing. They too wished to spank her once, but not with a blade, rather with bare palm, to truly feel the fullness and spring of that. No small number even cursed Ling Han in secret. Faced with such a heaven-sent chance, he had not taken greater advantage. Was he a fool? Since he had already forged enmity with the Wang clan, what use was restraint?
Who could say that, if he delayed, Fairy Wang might not fall for him completely? Yet even more people bristled with blazing fury. This brat had dared profane the goddess enshrined in their hearts. He deserved death 100-fold. Wang Yiyun herself cried out in shock. To be publicly spanked like this was an experience she had never known. Shame and rage surged together, threatening to tear her apart. What rendered her helpless was that she was utterly no match for Ling Han, and could only endure as he tormented her backside. Ah! She let out an embarrassed cry, then finally ceased all resistance. With a flicker of her form, she returned to the ground. Her expression settled back into its former calm, and once more she became the ethereal fairy of moments past. You concede defeat? Ling Han asked with a smile. Wang Yiyun's eyes spat fire. She wished for nothing more than to rip Ling Han into countless pieces, yet what could she do when she was inferior in strength? Though several spiritual infant tier cultivators were present, their power was roughly on par with hers. If she could not suppress Ling Han, she believed no one else here could. She forcibly swallowed her fury, maintaining her serene, fairy-like bearing, and said, Yiyun's skills are insufficient. Thus, I admit defeat. Ling Han calmly took her gambling stake and asked with an easy smile, Now then, is there anyone else who wishes to stop me from leaving? Silence answered him. Ling Han was simply too strong. He belonged to the monstrous ranks, in existence only the likes of Yao Huiyue or the Little Saber King, the foremost prodigies of their generation, could subdue. Anyone else stepping forth would only be courting a beating. Let us go. We'll change venues and drink to our hearts' content, Ling Han said to the Rain Emperor and Murong Qing. All right, both nodded. They departed in grand fashion, leaving many eyes blazing behind them. They had eaten, fought, played, and now left as they pleased, abandoning chaos and ruin in their wake. Wang Yiyun, too, wished to slam the doors and leave, but she was the host and still bore responsibility for the overall situation. How could she act on whim? She could only open her mouth and say, Everyone, let us discuss the details of the Striking Heaven Alliance. Ling Han, the Rain Emperor, and Murong Qing reached the mountain peak. Finding a clean slab of stone, they produced fine wine and delicacies and began to feast heartily. They also plucked over a dozen bowl-sized peaches from that branch of the spiritual peach tree. Their fragrance spread everywhere, making mouths water. This is what good food should be, Hu Nu declared as she ate, stuffing herself until her little face and hands gleamed with oil. Zhu Xuan, on the other hand, was reserved, taking small bites and swallowing slowly, perfectly displaying the poise of a refined lady. The three men were all ambitious and forthright. In their drunken haze, they decided to swear brotherhood. The Rain Emperor was naturally the eldest, Murong Qing the second, and Ling Han could only be the youngest, a fact that left him deeply dejected once sobriety returned. Counting both lifetimes, he was already over 200 years old. Yet now he had to call two young men, first brother and second brother. Feng Po Yun was another matter, as that man was indeed older, so calling him big brother cost him nothing. Still, the gloom passed quickly. Even if the brotherhood was sworn in drink, it was born of shared temperament and character. The Rain Emperor and Murong Qing were to his liking. Uncle Rabbit also wanted to join the fun, claiming it had lived for several hundred years and thus deserved to be first brother. As a result, Ling Han and the others looked at it with disdain, declaring they would be ashamed to be grouped with an animal, and rejected it outright, causing it to howl in fury. Though Wang Yun wished to keep the incident secret, there were too many witnesses, and with the matter involving a spanking, such an irresistibly sensational topic, the news from the previous day spread rapidly. Whenever Wang Yiyun was mentioned, people would give an "oh," sharing knowing looks. Naturally, the gossip grew more exaggerated as it spread. At first, it was merely a spanking. Later, it became that Wang Yiyun had been captured by Ling Han, that the man and woman spent a night alone together. When Wang Yiyun emerged, her clothes were in disarray, and she could not even close her legs. At the same time, Ling Han's battle prowess was widely acknowledged. All agreed that unless a supreme prodigy with a direct pass into Restore Heaven Academy appeared, no one else could match him. Moreover, it would have to be someone of the caliber of the Small Saber King or Lang Ya Tian. Weaker figures would not suffice. Thus, Ling Han was deemed to have openly set himself against the Blue Thunder sect. Disciples of the other four ancient great sects also kept a prudent distance from him, thwarting his plans to befriend one or two of them to obtain an ancient map. However, he found Kanye and had him act in his stead. After all, it was merely a map and not a treasure map. It should not be overly difficult. After another 3 days, an important moment arrived for Zhu Xuan. She was about to break through to the flower blossom tier. In truth, she had been ready 1 or 2 months earlier, but Ling Han had urged her to perfect her foundations as much as possible before advancing. This was the first step beyond mortality, after all, and thus of paramount importance. Yet with Ling Han at her side, cultivation resources were abundant beyond measure. In a short time, she had tempered her spiritual pedestal tier cultivation to an incredibly solid state, with no further room for strengthening, and thus began her breakthrough. With her vast accumulation and Ling Han's ample preparations of alchemical pills and spirit fruits, the breakthrough proceeded smoothly. In less than half a day, the spiritual seeds were planted. 3 days later, the divine flowers bloomed, and she officially entered the flower blossom tier. Zhu Xuan was overjoyed. Advancing into the flower blossom tier not only marked a crucial step on the martial path, granting her flight by her own power and freeing her from dependence on ordinary food, but most importantly, it bestowed an additional 200 years of lifespan, drastically slowing her aging. This meant that in the coming decades, not only would her beauty not fade, she would even appear younger. For a woman, especially one of peerless beauty, what reward could surpass this? "How many divine flowers did you cultivate?" Ling Han asked. He cared more about her future potential. As one of the top prodigies of the northern region, she must not neglect martial cultivation and hinder her progress because of him. 3 flowers, Zhu Xuan replied, delight written all over her face. Ordinarily, flower blossom tier cultivators could only nurture a single divine flower. Geniuses might manage 2, and those with 3 were geniuses among geniuses. With each additional divine flower, one could draw twice the world's natural energy when attacking. Flower blossom tier cultivators transcended mortality through natural energy. Thus, an extra divine flower was not a minor boost, but a complete transformation. Ling Han nodded. 3 flowers was respectable, placing her among the top talents. However, for figures like Yao Hui Yue and the Small Saber King, 3 flowers would not suffice. They would have 4, or perhaps even 5 or 6. Even so, he believed 6 was the absolute limit. As for himself, possessing 10 flowers was due to his 2 spiritual oceans and 2 spiritual pedestals, an utterly unique circumstance. No one else should be capable of such a feat.